U.S. Supreme Court, and usually most state Supreme Courts accept only a small percentage of appeals. Now, maybe this one is more likely because of some of the legal issues that have been presented and the fact that it's such a high profile case everyone's been watching. But it's still very small percentage of discretionary appeals are actually heard. If the conviction is overturned, then the judgment of conviction and the sentence, they're going to be vacated and we'll get a new trial. And last but least likely, there's a possibility that the conviction is affirmed, but the sentence is overturned, in which case the case will go back, but just for the limited sentencing portion. But again, I think that's the most likely outcome, unlikely outcome.
All right, Nima, breaking it all down for us. Thank you so much. We always appreciate your time here on Live Now from Fox.
Thank you, Anna. Great being on as always. Have a great weekend.
You too. And I do just want to show you this post that we have coming from Fox News. This was a statement saying, when I stab somebody, I'm going to lick the blood off their blade. That was new evidence that was coming out this week surrounding the Karmelo Anthony case, including the disturbing text that prosecutors say they found on his phone that could be fair game if he gets a new trial. You heard Nima and I breaking this all down as prosecutors say the message was part of a documented pattern involving an obsession with knives and guns and a desire to start fights. They argue the evidence helps explain why Anthony brought a knife to the track meet where he fatally stabbed Austin Metcalf. Jurors never heard it because both sides had an off-the-record gentleman's agreement to keep character evidence out of the courtroom and focus on what happened under the tent that day. So, of course, the development that we're waiting for right now is to learn whether that new trial will happen or not. Just showing you a live look right now out in Dallas as we're continuing to follow those headlines for you here on Live Now from Fox. It is a new hour now. Let's shift gears right now and just take a live look over the White House as the time in the nation's capital is just after 5 p.m. A live look right now over Capitol Hill. You can see it's sort of a cloudy day there in the nation's capital. And I want to show you this look. That is the scene as the stage is set for the Freedom 250 Grand Prix that is poised to bring dozens of race cars and tens of thousands of spectators to the heart of Washington, D.C.'s National Mall this weekend. It's a two-day motorsports event, and we've been bringing you some coverage throughout the day as we've been dipping into our friends at Fox 5 DC's coverage. They're on the ground there. They're interviewing people, and they're also speaking with the drivers. It looks like they're doing an interview right now. So let's go ahead and listen into their coverage.
Meaningful race, celebrating 250 years, being on the streets. I've never driven on a street course before, so yeah, this is my first one.
Oh, great! Rub it up. There we go. 1 out of 1. Came here, clean house and leave. So good. Thanks.
But I can go on and on. It just how much if we had just gone out there and had practice. I was worried about the rain. And by the way, I didn't sleep at all last night. I mean, these days I sleep like a baby. I have no problem sleeping. I could not sleep last night at all. So it goes to show you, that doesn't matter what's on the line. It's like it's just you can't help but be competitive and take it serious and know that there's pressure on you. By the way, my boss was putting a lot of pressure on me. He's been asking me, how come I haven't won an IROC race? And I've been, telling him, well, I'm trying, boss. We're doing this, we're doing that, we're having fun. And he's like, well, you better go get this one. So I could not let him down, or they're not going to let me back in the shop on Monday.
I think you can sleep easy tonight.
get the latest information when it comes to this case. So here's what we know so far right now. Give me 1 second. I am pulling up the webpage from our sister station up in Dallas, Fox 4 News up in Dallas. Give me 1 second. All right, so here's what we know so far. So a judge up in Collin County this weekend has denied Karmelo Anthony's request for a new trial on the fatal stabbing of Frisco student Austin Metcalf during a track meet last year. 19-year-old Karmelo Anthony was convicted of murder in June and was sentenced to 35 years in prison. Judge Michael Chitty, who was newly appointed to hear the matter after the judge oversaw the trial, was removed from the appeals process. So we have a lot of information that's coming down when it comes to all the information with this. We are waiting on our political expert, Charles Adams, to join us when it comes to this conversation to talk about everything with this case and why there was not a new case that was actually granted in this. And one of the big things that we do know is that this is not expected to be something that was going to be an easy decision to be made from the judge. We talked about that earlier this week when it came to the Isaiah Factor Uncensored Primetime Live earlier this week. So as you guys can see on your screen right there, I'm scrolling through to see what information is coming down from Fox 4 DFW, which is our sister station, Fox 4 up in Dallas. So right now, the latest that we know is that we know that the judge has denied a new trial for Karmelo Anthony when it comes to everything. And so I'm seeing a lot of comments right now that are coming in. So we have Lauren 206 who says, what? Two Sweetie 9 says, and bring out the characteristics of Austin Hunter. G Baller 46 says he gone. We have Denali G says they should bring out the character of all it should have been. Deshad says get new attorneys. Vicky Graves on Facebook says not fair to this young man. We have there are more comments coming in right now. We have G Baller 46 said he better be glad he's still got a shot at parole one day. Charles Jones was a spam. That was not good. Brad Pitt says great news, and somebody else who said well. So as we know right now, there's new information and breaking news as you guys are watching this right now. Karmelo Anthony's bid for new trial denied by newly appointed judge. Give me 1 second. I'm trying to gather some more information. I'm going to put you guys on a slate right now. And by a slate, I mean you guys are going to see something saying that we're going to be right back. So please do not go anywhere. Give us 1 second. All right, guys, we're continuing to follow this latest breaking update that's coming in right now. I'm waiting for our attorney expert to jump on to the call. But right now, the latest news that we have coming out of Fox 4 DFW, which is our sister station up in Dallas, says that Karmelo Anthony's bid for new trial denied by newly appointed judge. So as we know, the last couple of days, they have been trying to hear, they're hearing to figure out if this should be a trial that was going to be reopened and redone, essentially. So as we know so far, I'm reading through this as you guys are looking at everything right now. It says a judge on Saturday denied Karmelo Anthony's request for a new trial in the fatal stabbing of a Frisco student, Austin Metcalf, during a track meet last year. 19-year-old Karmelo Anthony, was convicted of murder in June and sentenced to 35 years in prison. Judge Michael Chitty, who was newly appointed, he was actually, as you guys may or may not remember, he was up in Kaufman County. He was retired. He took over the case after there was a recusal against the previous judge in the case. He heard the matter. So as we know right now, Karmelo Anthony's bid for a new trial has been denied. Like I said, I'm waiting right now for our attorney expert, Charles Adams, to hop on this Zoom right now as we try to update everybody with all the information that's coming in. So let me go and take a look at these comments that are coming in. So we have Baller, Big Baller, 6666. Everyone who is a lawyer knew this would happen. He has no grounds for appeal that are legitimate. His honestly luck lucky, because if any of that evidence came through, he would get life. So Big Baller, so one of the biggest things, since he was 17 years old during this thing, he could not be charged with life in prison or the death penalty. That is part of the thing that came from the Supreme Court. So just to clarify that information right there. Deanna Gray says, why isn't this fair? And Sky's the Limit says, too bad, keep fighting for Karmelo. So that is the latest with that. I am talking to Charles right now to get him logged onto here, and we are still watching all the information that's coming in. And somebody said free Justice Smollett. Okay, that's not the same thing that we're talking about right now, but thanks, Craig Folksinger. So the latest is people are jumping in right now. A judge on Saturday has denied Karmelo Anthony's request for a new trial in the fatal stabbing of Frisco student Austin Metcalf during a track meet last year. 19-year-old Karmelo Anthony was convicted of murder this past June and sentenced to 35 years in prison. Let's see what else we have. So there are some other people who are commenting on these cases. We have Moonlight 5577 says Allison, a white student, sentenced to 10 years in prison. Who are you talking about, Moonlight? I'm trying to get the information of who you're talking about before I comment on these things. So we have your comment right here. So this is all information that's popping down. Give me 1 second. I'm going to go ahead and see if Live Now is doing anything on this. So give me 1 second. They're still talking about something completely different. Okay, so Saudi Burton 8090 says this is not fair. This young man is innocent, was protecting himself. Well, you guys have a chance. Hop into the comments. Tell me what your thoughts are. Tell me if you think this is right, if it's fair, if it's unfair. There's a lot of people who are obviously sounding off when it comes to this, but this is obviously big breaking news here in the state of Texas. This is something that we have been talking about for quite a while. So make sure you hop into the comments when it comes to everything. Let me know what your thoughts are. And actually, just so people can see the comments that we're talking about. Oh, and Moonlight says, Big Baller, dummy. Ooh, not people sounding off in the comments like that. Okay. All right, so here are the comments on the right side of the screen. Make sure that you are sounding off with your comments. Make sure that you're telling me what your thoughts are. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and pull this up so you guys can see it. Give me 1 second. Don't go anywhere. Make sure you like, subscribe, follow. We're going to have more information when it comes to this here in just a couple of seconds. Give me 1 second. I'll be right back. All right, and for anybody who's just joining us right now, that was the clip that was played from Fox 4 DFW. So Karmelo Anthony, his bid for a new trial has been denied by a newly appointed judge. So the judge that was newly appointed was a retired judge from Kaufman County. If you're not familiar with North Texas, Kaufman County is, let me go ahead and pull it up right here. Hold on a second. Kaufman County is near Collin County, but it is not. Give me 1 second. Let me go and pull it up. All right, guys, give me 1 second. I am not exactly tech savvy when it comes to everything. Let me share this tab instead. So, okay, so right here, you see this is where Kaufman County is. Collin County is right in this area. You have Dallas County. You have where Fort Worth is, and you also have Denton County. So let me go ahead and bring in our expert, the one and only Charles Adam. Give me 1 second, guys. All right, Charles. Good afternoon, Charles. What's going on?
Well, I was worried about you asking me to do this last minute and me not having a shaved head and looking kind of scruffy. But I mean,
listen,
you look like you just stopped working as a barista to get on the camera.
Listen, I had to do what I had to do. I thought as long as it would take me to do anything to be on camera with you, I thought I would do it.
Well, I mean, I get it. I mean, I make you feel smarter and better looking by being such an ugly ogre. I'd love to do a TV with Shrek, because maybe for once in my life I might look pretty. And you're basically doing TV with Shrek that's been stuck under the rock for 2 centuries.
For 2 centuries, it's been a minute. It's been.
I am very, very pale. But let's talk about this. You know, some people seem surprised. I don't know why. But let's jump into the details of this denial of the motion for new trial by Judge Chitty, who is a retired rural Texas, eastern, not really deep East Texas, but East Texas, suburban Dallas, but a little more than suburban Dallas, a little bit further out to the countryside. Incredibly conservative judge who has given no quarter or no opportunity. No quarter was actually a phrase used. Anyhow, but it's not a surprising result from a legal perspective. A lot of people are upset about it.
And Charles, one of the big things too. So we've been covering this all week, or I would say, what is it, since Wednesday or Thursday, whenever the previous judge recused himself or was recused from the case, and then on Thursday and Friday when they're trying to figure out if they're going to actually have a retrial. One of the things that we had heard is the fact of this was not going to be an easy path when it came to Karmelo Anthony actually getting a new trial. This is not an easy path for anybody in that situation. Kind of break it down to us when it comes to somebody trying to get a retrial in this type of situation. What exactly does that mean, and why is it so difficult for people to actually have?
Well, I mean, you don't want the state or anyone to have to go through all the motions, all the effort and expense of a trial every time you don't get the outcome that you wanted, right? There are things that people put in place in protections for defendants, far more than in civil cases, but it's still something that is an incredible anomaly and usually takes an incredibly gross error or misbehavior by the court to, achieve that. It's a very uncommon remedy. And it's not something that the law is designed to facilitate whenever a criminal defendant is upset by an outcome. The whole thing astounds me, right? The strong feelings on both sides. I think a great number of people on either side of this, whether on the Anthony side or the anti-Anthony side, I think a lot of it's driven by perceptions of race that if you flip-flopped the racial identity of the victim and the murderer, that the same people screaming the loudest would feel the opposite about it. And I think that's always wrong, right? I think we should try to look at it through the lens of the facts. But here you have, just so much stuff. The crux of the focal argument was the alleged violation of this gentleman's agreement between the prosecution and the defense attorney concerning extraneous bad acts by both parties. Right? The bad acts by Metcalf were not at all relevant to the incident of the day, but most certainly would have probably been relevant during the sentencing of Anthony if there was an argument made by witnesses that Metcalf engaged in any racial behavior prior to the stabbing, right? We didn't see any evidence of that. In fact, even though the sole witness called on behalf of Anthony seemed to backtrack on his statements on what occurred and it actually became more of a prosecution witness presented by defense than anything. But there are some horrible allegations, not just simply allegations, right? It appears that Metcalf and his twin brother had been caught engaging in racist graffiti of the most heinous kind, using Nazi iconography and racial slurs directed at African Americans. They pled guilty. They took a 12-month probation. And that would not have been relevant if Anthony would have done it and used it as a vehicle to help achieve a conviction. It's a little bit more expansive when you're trying to paint a portrait, trying to justify or minimize the act of the defendant. The only arena you don't see that in is really there are statutory protections for sexual assault victims, right? With about their prior sexual history and stuff. But here, like if I took off my I'm worried about the law and justice, hat and put on the criminal defense attorney hat that I wore for so many years, and I was just a zealous advocate for Anthony, I would have never agreed not to bring up the very confirmed history of racism on the part of the victim. And I would have built my entire defense around the position that this horrible crime was committed in response to some sort of racialized anger, right? Which could have led to a manslaughter conviction and a much, much lower punishment for Anthony. I can't be more critical of the job that his defense attorney did. And I'm shocked when you look at the amount of money that was contributed to the family in an effort to give him the best counsel. And I think he has very good counsel now, that they ended up with someone that did such an incredibly lackluster job on so many levels, right?
Yeah.
I also think from what I've read, there was a lot of effort to encourage, it seems, there's been statements that Anthony was led to believe that he had a strong case and was going to win. And you saw that on the shock on his face when he was convicted. And then, of course, there was really no effort at mitigation during the sentencing. I think they just presented his mother, and she didn't even stay for the actual pronouncement. They should have had days and days of witnesses on his behalf. But really, the crux is he just agreed, this gentleman's agreement, which is not something that goes on in the Texas trial practice, especially in criminal law. You have a vehicle to memorialize agreements between the two attorneys to the court that can then be enforced. They didn't do this. It was just some nudge, wink, wink, handshake nonsense.
And Charles, I'm gonna jump in really quick. So when you're talking about everything right now, I know you're talking about the gentleman's agreement. Explain to me right now, when I hear, I've covered a lot of court cases, obviously not as many court cases if you have actually been involved with. What in the hell does a gentleman's agreement actually mean? And because when I hear about that, I think about a good old boys club from the Deep South. That's what I initially think of, and I'm not saying that that's right. But what does that actually mean when people are watching? They hear a gentleman's agreement. They hear the wink, wink, nudge, nudge, nudge. What does that actually mean?
Well, you think it's some Deep South nonsense because you're from the Midwest, where
I'm from up north.
You're from Ohio. That's not up north, right? That's the Rust Belt of loserdom and football and all kind of other stuff. Well, don't even get me started on the SEC, which happens to be from the Deep South and the only football conference that matters. But seriously, in the context of the law, it means nothing, right? Historically, if you want to look at the etymology of the term, it refers to two refined gentlemen agreeing to something, right? And it being binding upon them because it's a gentleman's agreement, but not a formal agreement. But, they feel bound by it because of their status as gentlemen. It's classist nonsense, but it has no bearing. Like in civil law, you can come to an agreement. Like I recently won a case where we entered into a Rule 11 agreement, which refers to a rule of procedure, to go to arbitration, right? And we both signed the document. It was submitted to the court. We went to arbitration. After they lost, the other side is now complaining and trying to get overturned, but they don't have a lot of vehicle to do that. Now, if we'd have just said, oh, we're just going to arbitrate it, let's just handshake on it, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, I wouldn't have a lot of ground to argue that it wasn't a binding or mandatory arbitration to the court when it was challenged. But because, I did things the right way, it closes the door. And so this whole gentleman's agreement, and what it seems the agreement was that during the case in chief of the prosecution and then the defense presentation of that evidence, they would avoid these subjects to focus on something I read was focus on what happened under the tent. It was incredibly stupid of both sides to agree to any of it, right? But what seems astounding is that, the argument I think that they're making is that Anthony was not allowed to testify because the state wouldn't agree that if he testified in a manner that contradicted what they were agreeing to keep out, that they still couldn't present it as rebuttal evidence, which of course you can. In fact, on the Texas Rules of Evidence, right, even stuff that is considered inadmissible, if the defendant were to discuss it or to say, well, I've never hit anyone, but there's all this evidence of prior assaults, well, that opens the door. That's the term. It's open the door, right? So what the state said was, look, if he testifies and opens the door to this, then we're going to get into it. And then the defense cried foul, and which it wasn't. I mean, you didn't have a moralized agreement, but even then there's ways around it, and kept him off the stand, right? Like if I was the prosecution, I would have absolutely wanted, and it would have probably been relevant in the presentation of the case in chief, the fact that he had been accused that morning of stalking his girlfriend in some pretty horrifying manner. Yeah. I would have wanted.
And that came out on what, Thursday this week?
Yeah, it's horrible. Like apparently she went to the school and said he stalked her. They downloaded a bunch of stuff on his phone where he was bragging about committing a robbery. He was talking about just that the 1:00 a.m. on the day that the stabbing occurred, he said he was low key on the verge and talking about how he felt like he was compelled to commit violence. He talked about punching girls in the past. He talked about the next time he assaulted someone, he was going to get expelled. Apparently had a very violent history from Louisiana before he moved to Texas, and just a very long history of aggression. I read somewhere where they're talking about that he attended some sort of anger class at Louisiana State University, and just this portrait that a lot of the media and a lot of the people showing extreme bias have tried to portray of this nice kid has completely fallen apart. And it seems like he is a misogynistic, violent bully who has been treating his classmates and women in his life horribly. He's the kind of violent person that will just stab somebody in the chest so hard that it actually pierces the bone and goes into their heart and kills them, right? He's not a good person. And there's a tremendous amount of evidence that Karmelo Anthony is an awful person. And I do believe that most of the people standing for him are doing so because of race. But conversely, right, it looks like the Metcalfs, the twin boys, did not fall far from the what appears to be racist tree of the father, and he's engaged in a lot of racial language. He said something, and I don't remember the term, but I know he used watermelon in it and said something offensive about blacks. And in an interview after the conviction, watermelon felon, I think is what he said, which is just clearly an incredibly, using completely a racist trope to be racist, right? And and spray painting Nazi iconography and the N-word on stuff. Who would do that? But Anthony, it does look like the Metcalf brothers pled guilty. They went through it. And of course, there was a lot of evidence that they had very good friends across the ethnic spectrum that were there at the tent and were teammates with them. But I mean, as a defense attorney, I would have wanted to work that in as much as I could. I think now we clearly know why Austin's twin brother did not testify at trial, because that would have likely opened the door to that type of questioning. But it's, it's something as a defense attorney, I know would have most certainly infected conversations and impacted the math and possibly allowed me to steward into the juror's mind, right, that something more happened than just, hey, you got to leave the tent, and shoved him and stabbed him in the heart. Even if, hey, you got to leave the tent, stab in the heart was what really happened, your job as a lawyer, so a lot of people don't want to hear this, is of course to zealously advocate for your client, right? Now you can't lie, you can't present mistruths. I think plenty of disgusting, despicable, unethical lawyers do, but you're not supposed to, right? But like I'll give you for instance, I had a police officer that shot a gun through the wall of his apartment while off duty at home, striking his neighbor and causing him great injury. That officer told the police that night that the gun went off while he was sleeping, a sleep shooting defense. Now, my job as a criminal defense attorney is to present that. I didn't contrive that. I didn't make it up, right? It was what my client told the police and what my client told me. So it's what I presented.
Yeah.
Do I believe that? Well, my belief doesn't matter. Did I win the trial? It's literally a sleep shooting trial. Yes, I did, because that was my job, right? Like I believe in oaths, like, I like marijuana, right? But I grew up in Austin. But when I was a policeman, didn't do it for years. When I was a judge, I didn't do it for years. As an attorney, I didn't do it until the Delta 9, because I took an oath. It's the same oath that criminal defense attorneys take, right?
Absolutely.
Because you're supposed to zealously represent your client, just like a prosecutor is supposed to zealously represent the state. And I think by the defense attorney agreeing not to get into that stuff, he hobbled his ability to fashion a defense that might have gotten his client a lesser time. It's also my understanding there was opportunities to plea bargain, opportunities to possibly plead to lesser included that weren't explored. I don't know that for sure, but that's what I've been told, should have been explored by an attorney who was conducting a reasonable analysis of the case, as opposed, right, to someone that maybe had other motivations, like the desire for camera time, the desire to have a big victory. For me, I've seen this my whole career, of lawyers that would rather risk their client's best interest to get in front of a camera, right? Like during my 2 decades doing criminal defense, which I don't do anymore, I would never talk about a case until it was over, right? You see these attorneys who are just looking for the camera. And
Charles, not to jump in really quick too, as we saw, I believe it was Judge Roach, correct me if I'm wrong when it comes to that, who was on WFAA up in Dallas as soon as the previous court case was done, and he was on camera saying what his thoughts were.
But here's the thing. You say as soon as the court case was done, it wasn't done, right? Yeah. Even the trial process wasn't done. You have, X number of days, you have a month to file your, so you can file your motion for a new trial, you file your notice of appeal, you do all these things that are post-verdict, right? Post-sentencing, which is the bifurcated process. And from a non-lawyer, you think, okay, well, after sentencing, it's over. But a judge knows it's not. Yeah. And a judge knows that it could go up on appeal and it could be pending for years. And frankly, there are canons of judicial conduct that restrain judicial behavior, right? Ultimately, I was the presiding judge for a city here in Harris County, like the boss judge for low-level municipal courts. The only judges.
Because you're the HBIC, Charles. You're the HBIC.
No. I mean, it was a city that I had an office in for years. A city I was a police officer in. This is a city in Harris County that I love, right? Yeah. But when I started doing TV, there are all these rules. Like I could never talk about specific candidates, or I could always talk about thoughts and ideas, right? Yep. And I made the decision that I'm a narcissist and I'd rather do TV. So I after many years of being the presiding judge for the city, I just chose to do TV because I didn't need the money anymore. And because, I wanted to be unconstrained by the canons that restricted my behavior. But this is an elected judge. Municipal judges are appointed. This is an elected district court judge. He knew what he was doing. And that's why I've always said it's very appropriate. His removal is very appropriate. Like you've seen people on the Metcalf side or the justice side of the fence. So, oh no, it's not fair. No, it's absolutely. That Judge Roach should have shut his mouth. He should have not commented at all because the process was still pending and it was still inappropriate. Everybody we're celebrating Judge Chitty's appointment, but I never thought for a second that a conservative rural Texas retired judge would say, "Oh yeah, this is because the gentleman's agreement is completely unenforceable." They made another argument about limiting access to the court by not opening the overflow room. That's an absurd argument, right? First of all, a lot of things were put in place by the judge because of the incredible disruptions. You had screaming, yelling outside the court. You had threats made to people by those ancillary to the case, supporters of Anthony, and you had to protect the process. Right. But it was still an open court as well. It just he wasn't allowed to disrupt it. That was a nothing. I saw no argument raised by this this alleged dream team for overturning the verdict that even smelt like a winner. Right. It was just an empty motion.
And Charles, that's my question for you too, is going back to everything when it comes to them trying to figure out if they're going to do a new trial and everything like that. This is not as easy as people think it is to make it happen. And I know that you kind of alluded to that a little bit ago. It has to be something that's so heinous that has it overturned. Am I incorrect when I say that or no?
You're right. No, it has to be. It has heinous. All right, Bill and Ted. It has to be something in like an incredibly glaring error. You'll see it sometime. Like the easiest way to get an appeal, right, on a criminal conviction is some sort of charging instrument, like the judge denies an affirmative defense that has been established or even possibly established, but I don't mean proven, but just the base elements of it. And the judge says, no, like, I'm not going to give you the self-defense instruction. So typically judges should be very expansive on that. It's just, there was nothing, their arguments, that's why they were so thin, right? This gentleman's agreement argument, every lawyer knows it's nonsense. It's just not something you can enforce. And that seemed to be the focal argument. And it does appear that the state honored it on the front end by not presenting any of this evidence about his stalking behavior, threatening behavior that on that very day. And that would have been completely relevant because it would have gone to his mindset. Why did he bring a knife? Despite Quanell X's still to this day referring to it as a cleat sharpener. No, it was a very serious lock blade knife that's designed for stabbing things, right?
So Charles, let me jump in really quick. So my question, one of the other questions I have for you too, when it comes to everything around this is, obviously we know the facts that have been presented. We know the facts that have been presented when it comes to everything like that. Do you think when it comes to this trial specifically, is there a chance that this could be overturned or could be changed or something like that? What are the next steps when it comes to everything?
Well, now that the motion for a new trial has been denied, they'll file a notice of appeal, right? And then it'll go up to, this wasn't a capital conviction. So you have intermediate appellate courts, right? So it'll go there. They're typically kept right there. But sometimes, right, they'll be transferred. Houston's unique in that we have both the first and the 14th Court of Appeals here, which is the only city that has two in it. The 14th used to be in Galveston. The first, I think the first used to be in Galveston. I worked at the 14th as a briefing attorney. But so you appeal to the appellate court, all right? And if it doesn't get reassigned somewhere else, it'll be right there. And then, so let's say the Dallas County Court of Appeals gets it. The Dallas Court of Appeals gets it, and then they'll look at it, but they're going to look at very similar arguments. And again, incredibly empty arguments. I don't see any catalyst for getting this conviction or the sentence overturned other than possibly ineffective assistance of counsel. And that is such a high bar that in Texas, a sleeping lawyer during a capital murder case was held to not be ineffective. So, it's one of those like spilled coffee iconic decisions that's just horrifying, but it's an incredibly high bar for ineffective assistance of counsel. Whereas I don't think it meets it. I think he just did an incredibly bad job. Right. And like I said, I've seen it in my life. Like, you have a lot of lawyers that get people in their office And there's two tacks that a great number take. They either act like they have a magic wand and they're going to make everything go away, or they overstate the exposure and say, hey, you're looking at all these years, but I might be able to get you a probation and I'll take care of it. But you're in a whole lot of, they either try to scare or overpromise people sit across their desk. When I was doing criminal defense, which I don't anymore, I'd always try to have very, very honest conversation. It led me to build a very, very, very successful and very robust practice. But I would tell people all the time, bad news. And I would lose business that way. You're in a lot of trouble, but this is how we would do it. The only time I would make someone overconfident was when I was overconfident. This is nonsense. They will dump this or we'll force feed it down their throats, right? Which is very rare. But here it seems like, despite having an incredibly compelling case and a lot of evidence for the state, that Anthony's attorney led him to believe that he had a greater shot at victory than anyone should have led him to believe.
Yeah.
And if you were going to have a shot at reduced charge, this racism stuff from the victim, you most certainly would have tried to find a way to get that in, as opposed to simply gentlemen's agreeing to keep it out, right?
Absolutely.
And if there was an opportunity on the table to negotiate a plea bargain, manslaughter, there's a 20-year cap. Plenty of people get probation for manslaughter. I think he'd have probably done, a decade. But a decade on manslaughter, you're out in 5 years. He's still living his life. And that, if you're looking through the lens of the Anthony family, a very bad job was done. I think his parents probably contributed to him being overconfident. They're obviously, and I don't know if they received the money, but there was a tremendous amount of money generated. There's been all kind of allegations about the spending, but I don't know that family. But it does seem like Karmelo had a very long history of incredible violence and misogyny and very scary behavior towards women that suggests that they were aware there was a problem, right? And it seems like, there was some scary stuff about the Metcalf family that could have mitigated it that the attorney just didn't get into. So the whole thing's a mess,
Yeah, no, for sure, Charles. And one of the things I want to go through right now is I want to go through these comments and I want to get your reaction to some of these comments. So we have quite a few that are coming in. So on YouTube, Big Baller 6666 says, protecting himself for sure. That's why he texted a picture of a knife and said he was on the verge right before he murdered Austin. He went to the track meet looking for a fight and he got it. And then John Weisgood 7000 said, I was going to laugh my ass off if there was a retrial because more evidence against the murderer was going to get him more than 35 years. I think one of the things too, kind of going off of that too, is people need to realize that because of the Supreme Court, you still only have, you can only sentence somebody to so much time because of what the Supreme Court ruling was. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, if Anthony was still 17, was he 17 when he committed the murder?
He was 17 when it happened.
Yes, there was a United States, not Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, but a United States Supreme Court case that limits, there's no sentencing a 17-year-old to life without the possibility of parole, right?
And also on top of that too, you can't sentence somebody to the death penalty at the same time.
Yeah, no, right. There's no, but they didn't prosecute this as a capital murder. So that wasn't possible in the first place. But yes, no, there are two Supreme Court cases that restrict that for 17-year-olds. Now, mind you, in some states, right, 17, you haven't reached your age of majority. Like you're not an adult in the eyes of the criminal law at 17 in a number of states in the union, but you are in Texas. And I've had that conversation. One time I had a client who brought a tray of marijuana brownies that were made with marijuana oil, not marijuana leaf, to school. And because of the weight of the brownies and the fact that he brought it to school, he was looking at 5 years to life as a 17-year-old. Now, I ultimately got that case dismissed, but what a horrible charge to bring on a 17-year-old. You need to get suspended or in trouble if you're bringing intoxicants to class, but you shouldn't be looking at life in our hellish hellscape of a prison system for a bunch of weed brownies. But I mean, you could still get 40, 50 years. You just can't get you have got to have the opportunity for parole. And there are other things, but yes, he most certainly get sentenced to longer than 35. But
Absolutely.
I think doing a good job, if the defense attorney had done his job, we'd have seen a much shorter sentence. We wouldn't have seen a trial. We would have seen a mea culpa falling of the sword, an acknowledgement of his bad act, but an attempt to minimize the charge that he pled to, or put a cap on, do an open plea with a cap on the years or something.
And one of the big things too, Charles, I think that people need to remember. So like, as I'm clicking through like the comments and stuff like that right now, is people need to remember is when they're watching these types of court cases roll out, they're going to see a lot of court cases or a lot of people who are on social media, who are social media influencers, who are doing this, who are doing that, who don't have the actual, what am I looking for? They're not going to have the factual evidence. They're going to sit here and put out their own personal beliefs on certain things. And people need to realize that there is still a court system that needs to take place. There's still things that need to happen, whether we like it or disagree with it. That's the reality of it. That's how our country is set up. That's how court cases are set up. And there's like a lot of there's a lot of comments through here and stuff like that where people are, a lot of people who are going through here who disagree with something, but that they see something on social media and they just rattle off what they think. I mean,
well, I'm wondering how many comments about that ridiculous nose ring have happened.
Well, I mean, my nose ring is awesome. What are you talking about? I'm trying to get you to get your nose ring too.
Do the boogers get stuck on it, or you work them around it? I mean, how's that?
I work them around it.
It's disgusting. I don't want to be too lighthearted here, but it's a live stream.
Yeah, no, it's a live stream. We have a lot of comments, and what's so funny is I was actually going on mute. I messed something up, and I had something on mute. So, but there's a lot of comments in here and stuff like that about what people's thoughts are and stuff like that. And you have people who are pro Karmelo Anthony, who are pro Austin Metcalf, and people who are just going back and forth. To be completely honest with you, yeah, I mean. Charles, what's next? What's going to happen next?
I mean, we're gonna see an appeal. A lot of attorneys have jumped on pro bono, which, like, where were they during the trial, right? Who are going to get all the media attention they can to prosecute this appeal, and then it's going to go nowhere, right? So let's say the appeal, then they'll have the opportunity to go to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals that I don't even think will accept the case. Then you can file a writ of habeas corpus in the federal system. You can also appeal the mid-tier appellate, the Dallas Court of Appeals, I think ultimately rejection of the claims raised by Anthony's team in the appeal. You can try to file a petition of certiorari for the U.S. Supreme Court as well. I don't think that'll go anywhere. I think this will drag on for a few years and it won't go anywhere at all. I think he's ultimately going to spend probably 18, 19, maybe 20 years in prison, when if someone would have sat down and had a real conversation with both Anthony and his parents about the amount of exposure he had, that it could have been far, far shorter. But also, it seems like if the parents would have parented, I mean, some of this stuff in these texts from Anthony, about punching girls and robbing people, the stalker behavior, trying to bring weapons to the Texas State Fair, running around with guns and knives. I mean, let's be real. That's bad parenting, right? If you have a kid that engages in any of these behaviors, as a father, you should be immediately interceding. You shouldn't have had access to weapons. You shouldn't have access to, you find out your kid robbed somebody of $300, and robbery is not stealing, right? Robbery is stealing with violence, right? How do you as a parent not make incredible changes in their lifestyle? A famous historic kind of crime adjacent story. People my age, younger people might, but there was a show in the 80s called Murder, She Wrote, with an older star named
I remember
Angela
that show. That show.
She was also in like Chitty Chitty Bang Bang Disease. Angela Lansbury was a famous actress for many, many years. Well, her 15-year-old daughter got swept up in the Charles Manson cult, right? And this is obviously before Murder, She Wrote, walked away from Hollywood, moved her entire family to Ireland, and got her daughter away from Charles Manson before, of course, all the murders of, Sharon Tate. And, it's what a parent should do, right? When a child is acting bad, sometimes you have to take drastic measures to prevent them from getting worse. And what it seems like is that the Anthony parents were enablers both before the violence and after the violence. And the real question is, as a parent, right? And maybe they just got bad advice from all the activists that were swirling around him, or the attorneys they spoke with, who filled them with an arrogant misbelief of the possibilities. But it seemed like it was a rush to monetize this horrible act, right? And it's sad. I mean, the whole thing's sad, right? Metcalf getting, whether he was a young racist or just an idiot that did something stupid and served his probation, learned his lesson, I don't know. But it's still sad that he was at a school event where he got stabbed to death. It's horrible. It's a tragedy. And his poor brother, holding him while he died. I mean, the whole thing's just god awful.
Charles, let me ask you this really quick, not to cut you off. When it came to the possible,
can I just say one thing? Ola 9415, you are absolutely right. It was bed knobs and broomsticks. I'm 54 years old. I was not alive when either of those movies came out. I remember watching them VHS at my grandparents' house, because that's where I went all the time when I was a kid, because we were poor. My mistake.
Charles, what is VHS?
Shut up. I'm going to come through this, man. You know what? Matt is only like, what are you, like 34? Well, how old are you?
Thank you, Charles. I'll be 39 in less than a week.
Yeah, but you look 52.
A week from today.
But you look 52. You look old enough to know what VHS is. I know you got that.
I feel like I'm
just for
like
men in that beard covering up them grays. See,
Charles, I tried to dye this shit here recently.
Language
and we're on stream. I don't care. I tried to dye.
I do. Have respect.
My gosh,
for the
I'm
audience.
sorry
Go
that
ahead.
you're a God-fearing person. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
so I tried dyeing my beard here recently, and then it came back grayer than what it was before.
Like you have to, like I don't dye mine.
If
everybody that watches this show knows that I'm bald too. I was at a comedy show like 6 months ago. My wife likes comedy, and I'll sit in the back. I don't participate. Like I'm not trying to get attention. Those people that interrupt comedians. And a comedian, African American comedian, called me KKK Claus, right? Because I had a little bit longer.
Was that the comedian or Quan?
No, the comedian just on the stage goes, "Oh, look, you got KKK Claus over there." I'm like, that's hurtful. That's hurtful. I don't want to be bald. I don't want to be bald. I'd have hair down to my butt crack if I could, right? I'd be Crystal Galen it if I could. I don't have these choices.
But here's the thing that's funny too, Charles, is the simple fact of not trying to blow your cover. Is out of anybody who I've ever worked with, you are not as conservative.
Oh no, I've never been a
KKK Claus.
No, like because I argue with Quanell, people just assume I'm this far right Fox News right winger. I'm not at all, right? I am a left leaning centrist. I believe in public safety. I believe
he loves
in
the gays.
I've been an advocate for. I'm a liberty advocate, like for gay marriage for decades, long before people forget that both the Clintons and the Obamas were antagonistic towards gay marriage early on. They both shifted on this issue. I believe in ending the drug war, except for things like fentanyl and crystal meth. And even those drugs, I don't think individual users should ever be looking at felonies. I think that cops should only be focused on public safety and victim crime, which means if someone's like drunk acting crazy in the streets, they should get detained, right? But I don't think we should be telling people how to live or what to do. But yes, no, because I'm a middle-aged bald white guy. I think the assumption is always that I'm some far right winger. Not to say there's not plenty of idiocy on the left too. It's like a competition, right? And us Americans, we're forced to politically. We have to look at these two candidates, right? Like we have this Talrico Paxton contest coming up, and we've got to look at it and say, who do we think hurts our family, our community, and our state the least? Because they're both absolute idiots. I mean, you look at some of Talrico's comments on this case, you look at the fact that Paxton's a thieving, lying fraud. It's just crazy. I saw Cornyn walking out of, because I also have a home in Austin, And, it's sad. I say barbershop. I had to cut my hair so much more as a bald man because I go get it shaved. But he was coming out as I was going in of the one I go to in Austin. And I kind of felt bad for the guy. I haven't agreed with him ideologically, but God, Texas voters have gotten our primary so wrong and left us with such horrible options on both sides of the ideological aisle that it's just disgusting and pathetic. It really is.
Oh, and I completely understand where you're coming from. All right, let's go and get back to some of these comments right here really quick because I want to get your feedback on some of them. Let me scroll up some. Let me keep scrolling. All right, we're gonna just start here. Okay, so Big Baller said, how would have Austin's past behavior been relevant? Karmelo did not know Austin, and the only matter in the debate was Karmelo's mindset. Character evidence of prior bad acts of Austin are irrelevant. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I absolutely agree. If you look at Texas law, right, if there was no allegation that he used any racial slurs, right, that at the time at the incident or engaged in any racialized animosity directed at Anthony, then it would not be relevant. If there was allegations or testimony and then it was rebutted, right, or he was presented as someone that doesn't have any history of that and the door was open, then it would become relevant. But as a defense attorney, right, and again, you're looking from a defense attorney mindset, you're looking at through the lens of how am I working within the bounds of ethics to achieve the best outcome for my client. And then, of course, most defense attorneys aren't worried about the ethics of it. Not most, but a good chunk of them, right? But you as a defense attorney, you want to use that card if you can, right? You would set up the witnesses to ask them questions during cross in a manner to elicit them opening the door. Now, it's a careful game, right? Because you don't want to be so brazen about it that the judge doesn't allow the open door. But look, you would want to bring it up. You would want to make it a focus of conversation. And, I served on a felony jury. And I was honest. I raised my hand. I said, I'm a former police officer. I was a judge at the time because it was a municipal judge. I also had a practice and I had a very robust criminal practice at the time. And I told the prosecutor and the defense attorney, a judge, former police officer, defense attorney, one of them should have struck me, right? We go back and that was a great learning experience for me because the jurors were talking about everything but the elements of the case. Everything but what they should have been talking about. And I just sat there like a fly on the wall because I knew my position on it, which was not guilty.
Hey, Charles, hold on 1 second. Give me 1 second. I'm about ready to switch this over. So I'm watching our coverage over on fox26houston.com about everything. Give me 1 second. I want to make sure that we could see, because I want to get your response on this too, Charles.
This means you get to go start
Give
over
me 1
and
second.
get the evidence in.
Well, thank you, Chris, again, for taking the time out to break this down for people who may be confused and just give them more insight into this actual case. We appreciate it. So Fox 26 is your Gulf Coast weather authority, and we are currently in a...
All right,
Shocking. Shocking.
I know.
You did a mediocre job.
Well, you know what's so funny?
Hey, that's what they call you behind your back. It's mediocre Matt. You know that,
Oh,
right?
I actually like it. We got the two M's right there. No, I was watching it. I'm actually kind of disappointed it only lasted 5 minutes because the two of us have been talking for the last 20 minutes. And I would expect more information coming out, but guess what?
I mean, it's not an incredible. I mean, it was denied. It was denied because there was no winning arguments in the motion. Period. There was no legal basis. This gentleman's agreement argument is absolute nonsense. That's why the argument was so thin.
So let's look at some of these comments though, because I'm gonna go ahead and pop these up. Are you able to see these comments when I pop them up?
Yeah, I see Damien's.
All right, hold on. Let me scroll up a little bit because I have a lot. Hold on a second. Okay, so we have from DT05, the appeal will be denied, obviously.
Yeah.
We have Damien. I don't know. Do you know what that's referring to? I don't know what that's actually referring to.
I think Jake Lane is an activist that made some ugly comments and was arrested for those threats. Yeah, I think I'm a free speech absolutist up to and limiting it to, threats of violence and stuff. And I would agree that anyone that threatens to be violent towards any other individual in a manner that satisfies the elements of terroristic threat should be arrested. But that's just me. I don't think race should be a part of the math.
Absolutely. And that's one of the big conversations with this too that we've been talking about all week long, is that race has been such a big part of this conversation. And I think it controls a lot of people's perceptions. Like, we've obviously debated it, me and Quanell, and I've made the point on the face-off, and I'll make the point again. I think obviously if Metcalf was black and Anthony was white, Quanell X's position would be the exact opposite of what it is, right? Whereas my position would be the same either way. And I think we have too many people, both white and black, that take positions based on race. But I think my AC repair guy is here, so I got a dip. All right, sounds good. Well, everybody, Charles Adams has been here giving us some insight when it comes to everything with Karmelo Anthony, as we know is all right. We'll see you later, Charles. Thank you. So again, as we know, he will not be getting a new case. Stick with us. We'll have the latest on fox26houston.com, and we'll go from there. So thank you guys so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you guys soon.